So tonight, one of my favorite nights of each year here at the School of Architecture, it is my true delight to honor Timothy Lanahan and his family, the whole discipline of how we shape our earth together, which we all are sort of involved in, and Jenny Jones, who is a formidable practitioner and advocate for our landscape and for design as something that we can do basically with heart and mind every day. So a couple of, I guess, words of acknowledgement to begin. One of the things that some of you may already know about Jenny and her practice, Terremoto, is that they have spent a lot of time thinking about our indigenous communities and histories and the land back movement. And so I think it's nice to sort of note that the drawing that we have that we're looking at that was made by a student here at the school several years ago is one of the efforts that the Yale community has made to think a little bit more carefully about our own relationship as an institution and members of the Yale community to our indigenous neighbors and predecessors, ancestors. And I know that Jenny will touch a little bit on some of those issues in her talk tonight. I also want to give mention to Timothy Egan Lanahan, who this lecture is named for. And he was a member of the Yale College class of 1980 and then the School of Architecture graduating in 84. And he came, he had a very, I think, highly recognized and brilliant career. It was very short, unfortunately. And this is the 33rd annual lecture given in his memory and honor by his family. It has become a lecture that is in some ways sought after to give, and the number of esteemed landscape architects and thinkers who have had a chance to come and speak to the Yale community is long and illustrious. Just to mention a few that Jenny comes in line after today. Kate Orff was here just a few years ago, Christy Tena Ike, Walter Hood, Michael van Valkenburg, but there are many, many other people. I think one of the things that's particularly nice about the nature of this lecture is that it is not just design practitioners or leading kind of famous members of the design community, but it's also many people who are historians and thinkers and theorists about how we understand the planet and its history. One of the things that is important to mention is that the Lanahan family has been one of the strongest advocates for landscape at the school for many, many years, and that they not only support this lecture, but they also support various kinds of studies and other efforts. I think faculty and trips, things I'm probably been a beneficiary unbeknownst to me in a very daily way. And so thank you very much, those of you who are here from the family tonight. To speak a little bit about Jenny before she speaks, as a landscape architect and a landscape designer, she has been a pretty forceful advocate for experimentation and justice. And I think one of the things that made me think she would be a wonderful fit for our community is that the way her practice, Terremoto, and she work is very much sort of in the ground. It's a very material, very relationship-driven way of working. And there is a true commitment to small acts of design. They're a practice that has really embraced gardens as a way of sort of changing our relationship to each other and to the places that we live. And I think that they're doing that with sort of more intention and more, I don't know, grace than any other practice that I'm aware of today. She has a couple of specific things that she'll talk about, something called test plots, which is an experimental process of working to have community-based design that is also about bringing native plants and habitat back to life. And then there is also a major effort which ties to some of the work that some of the people here in the room tonight have also done around labor and how we understand ourselves as people who participate in design and the built environment, but also the work that all the people who actually build our projects do, and trying to be really engaged in that conversation and trying to, I would say in some ways, have some of the power relationships that are just baked into how design is enacted change. And it's just a very daily part of the way that she lives her life and that their practice runs. And I think that that is something that most of the people I've talked to in this room are interested in. So she'll share some thoughts about that too. About Jenny herself, she is a person who has had a little bit of a meandering path to this profession, and I imagine that it's not totally clear where your path will end up, even whether or not she'll stay always doing exactly this kind of landscape architecture. She may speak some about that, but she began as a middle school teacher of environmental science, and then was a kind of tree advocate or tree planting person in Washington, D.C., and eventually drawn to, I think, actually drawings of sort of design drawings of landscapes, made a career shift. And she studied at UVA for undergrad and for grad, and I think that's also probably of interest to some of you. With that, I am super, super excited to have her start to speak. And the last thing I think I should mention is that Terremoto has two offices. One is in San Francisco, the other is in LA. And I think something that I'm particularly interested for us to continue to be talking about is how we bridge some of the very exciting things that are happening out in the western parts of our country with some of the things that we're doing day to day. And there's a slightly different scale of work, and there's a different set of practices and relationships, but I think there's a lot to learn. So welcome, and come on up.
No, I have another one, but I'm just going to grab it real quick. I'm coming back. We had a water.
I drank her water.
Water mix-up. So I have a backup. Do you want this one? Okay. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I love this lecture hall. It's really cool. Just to start, can you guys hear me okay? How many of you are architects or studying architecture? Raise your hands, please. What about School of the Environment? Yeah, cool. Any other schools that I missed that I should have asked about? That's pretty much it. Okay, it's good. It's good to know who I'm speaking to. Cool, well, thanks for coming tonight, and thanks for inviting me to be here, Becca. I had the pleasure of visiting the office of Reed Hildebrand this morning. We've been longtime collaborators with them on the topic of labor, but I had yet to ever really visit the office and get to know them. And we had some really fruitful, beautiful conversations today that I am hoping will continue into the future. So I'm glad to be here today speaking with you. I hope to have it be a conversation at the end where we can have dialogue. And then I'm also excited to continue the dialogues that I've started today with some of the members of your community, Becca and Phil. It's been some really, really stimulating intellectual conversations. Y'all are smart here at Yale. Okay. So I'm Jenny. I am here representing Terremoto. We are a landscape architectural firm based in California, practicing in densely populated, richly biodiverse, and environmentally precarious landscapes. We have an office in Berkeley. We were in San Francisco. It's okay. And now we're in Berkeley, and one in Los Angeles. And what's interesting is that the office was actually founded from the start in two places. David and Alan are the co-founders. David's here. David and this is Alan. I do just want to briefly mention that Alan passed away last year after a long and very brave battle with cancer. We love him, we miss him, and his ethos of kind of elementality and simplicity continues to permeate our work today. And so I just want to honor his memory. Our work draws from the history of gardens and landscapes while simultaneously challenging the established conventions of the design and landscape industry. We seek to co-create gardens that encourage humans and non-humans alike to exist in beautiful webs of relationships of care. I often use the word gardens more than landscapes because we see ourselves as activists in a movement to bring gardening back into landscape architecture. Yes, we are designers. We have been trained in landscape architecture. We all have degrees in it, but we are gardeners first. We frame our work through the lens of gardening, tending, tidying, collecting, sowing, harvesting, pruning, and composting. These are the things that guide us. And in our broader profession, we tend to see the word gardener or landscaper used in a slightly derogatory way. But we are inspired by the work of Julian Raxworthy in his book Overgrown, which calls for a return to gardening within our profession of landscape architecture, and we proudly position ourselves within this movement. Today, what I'm going to do is generally talk about radical. Radical is the shorthand for our guiding philosophy of radical gardens of love and interconnectedness. I'm going to talk about the 5 principles that guide our work. And towards the end of the lecture, I'm going to kind of spiral out into two of the biggest themes for me right now, which are that of land and labor and test plot, as Becca mentioned. So the last category, honor, process, labor, and care, is gonna really be an expanded category that I'll talk about. So Radical Gardens of Love and Interconnectedness is a framework we've developed over the years to use as we design and build gardens. We believe in constant evolution, so these principles I've listed here are not fixed. In fact, within our company, we have 4 principals in our office, and we just had our partner retreat, and we actually can't even agree on what these principles are. So these are my 5 principles. One of the other partners in our office has 17 principles. So we are very fluid. We fully reserve the right to modify these in the future. They're aspirational, these principles. We strive towards them on all of our projects. Not every project is perfectly radical, but the general goal is to move towards making gardens that are fair, just, and generous to all living things. Gardens that flow with all the beautiful and intricate cycles of nature that form our precious world. These principles are to seek modesty, beauty, and openness, to localize and close loops of matter and energy, to design for ecosystems, to support our community, and to honor process, labor, and care. That's what they are today. So the first one, and I'm going to use these principles to kind of provide a framework for really just sharing our work with you. I'm excited to share it with you. I'm excited for you to critique it, ask questions. When the lecture's over, we'll talk. But then after the lecture, genuinely, if you want to have conversations, email me. We love hearing from students and practitioners, and we love forming friendships, intellectual friendships with people from all over the world. So come at me with your thoughts. So the first principle is to seek modesty, beauty, and openness. This principle is really one of the main signifiers of our work, and I would say is one of the main legacies of Alan, who co-founded the practice with David 14 years ago. So in general, we seek to design with modesty in mind. We love to work with affordable, readily available materials. Materials that you can find at your local Home Depot or whatever the local hardware store is. I do just want to give a shout out to Julie Bargman, who was my professor at UVA, the founder of Dirt Studio. She gave a lecture called Modesty a couple years ago at the GSD, and I just thought that so beautifully encapsulated her work, but also was very inspiring to us as a guiding word that we could latch onto. Just always looking for the simplest expression of a material and allowing materials to express themselves simply. So rather than coming up with crazy details that we've never seen before, or that a computer developed, or that are shocking or spectacle, we tend to go in the opposite direction and seek for quiet, simplicity. We tend to also let the materials be really simple and elemental and quiet, and then let the planting be really exuberant, which just feels appropriate for our time. We also like to experiment with material. So in both of these cases, in this case, we have a simple footing that somebody might use for a very tiny deck or small structure that we've turned into the footing for a bench. This is in the setting of a Rudolf Schindler apartment complex in Silver Lake, and where he was experimenting with angles on the walls in the buildings. And so we thought that this simple play on a very cheap piece of concrete Schindler would have loved and fits right into the project. And then obviously in this case, there was a kind of funny drop-off that the architect left us with, and these concrete pavers happened to be on site, and we used them in that way. But there's a spectrum of complexity and simplicity, and I think modesty allows for both. So sometimes the overarching principle is to seek modesty, beauty, and openness. The photo on the left, I would say, might not look modest, but this is also at that Schindler apartment complex, and we are fully responding to his work there and being open to exploring ornament and beauty and detail, which he did on his buildings there. There was also a legacy of tile work on that project that we decided to explore and to kind of riff on Carlos Scarpa, one of our heroes. So we kind of like to say that this project is Schindler meets Scarpa with all the tile work. And this project was fun because in this one, we really had to tell the contractor to get more sloppy with the concrete details. He was doing it too perfectly. And we said, no, it's got to be sloppier. How would Schindler's guys have done it back in the day? So just allowing ourselves to really be open and to collaborate with the contractor, which I'll speak more on later. But then other times really seeking that elemental quietude of a project. And then I think part of this principle is also letting the site speak for itself, and also letting architecture inform what we do and letting the architecture speak. So the project on the left is Laguna Canyon Foundation, a nonprofit headquartered in Orange County in Laguna. They do restoration work across the region. And these are their nursery structures that we designed and built for them. And I think what's cool about this project is that it lets these structures let the land speak. They fit in very quietly, but they're not doing nothing. They're also bold in themselves. And I think that there's room for both. Sometimes a bold move can actually let the natural environment around speak even louder. It's an interesting, unexpected result. And then the one on the left, you all should know. As architects, Sea Ranch, we had the great fortune of being able to work there and just really letting the architecture shine, really letting the original design intent shine, and just being open to that process. The second principle is to localize and close loops of matter and energy. This principle, I would say, grows out of modesty, but it also grows out of a desire for economy and conservation. So we believe that our profession must be more resourceful in our material choices, and really our climate crisis demands it. Not only should we be thinking about embodied carbon, but I had a very interesting conversation with Phil today about embodied suffering, which was a phrase I had not heard before. We have talked about labor within Terremoto and our collaborators. But Phil, I'm really grateful for our conversation today, and I look forward to talking more with you about that. And I think that actually embodied carbon and embodied suffering might be kind of twin symptoms of a greater problem in our society. So thank you for that. We like to let old and new coexist in a project. We think those juxtapositions are really beautiful. We're always looking for ways to have our clients save money and save resources. So this is an example of this wall was falling down on the other end. We had to rebuild it. We rebuilt it with CMU. But as soon as the wall wasn't falling down anymore, we just made a transition and we put a plant in front of it. And nobody cares. That's my solution to everything, is put a plant in front of it. Anytime there's a detail that's unresolved, and it really works out well and it saves a lot of money. So if you ever have a detail you can't figure out, just pitch to the landscape architect. Can you just put a plant in front of it? But that's what this Cleveland sage is doing here. It's hiding the transition on that wall and letting the old Arroyo stone mortared wall continue to exist in a really beautiful way. The project on the right, I absolutely adore. This is at a private residence in Beverly Hills where the oak woodland was suffering from poor planting practices and poor irrigation practices and bad construction practices where they just dumped trash down the hill and dirt was building up at the base of the trees and slowly killing the oaks. We lost one of the big, beautiful grandmother oaks on the property while we were building these trails. But rather than ship her up or cart her out or take her to the dump, we decided to, inspired by Julie Bargman, dump it right there. Is the acronym for her practice, DIRT, dump it right there. Another thing I hope you guys all take forward with you in your profession, just use what you have. So we transitioned our stone wall into a stacked wood wall using the parts of that oak tree, and this wall has held up really beautifully over time. And actually creates wonderful habitat for insects and for lizards. Platform, I'm gonna skip this one other than just to say it's a small residential project where all of these materials were on site. And I think there's a beauty in here that you don't see in everyday landscape projects on the internet, a beauty of reuse, and just we're trying to challenge the conventions of design beauty that you see in the media. And we want to kind of push onto the culture that this is beautiful too. Reuse is beautiful. The project on the right is a little more polished. This is Platform Park in Culver City. All of the materials on this project came from within 100 miles of the park. David kind of developed a thought experiment on this one. Could we keep it all to within a 100-mile radius? And they successfully did, reusing fallen timbers from within the urban forest of Los Angeles. Sourcing rock from nearby quarries, as well as all of the plants and the wood. And I think I just love these two projects because one's very hippie and kind of earthy. The other is more polished and urban. And I think I want to push you all to consider material reuse no matter what style you're attracted to. It can be done. The results can be humble, but the results of material reuse and closing loops of matter and energy can also be exuberant and ambitious and quite beautiful. The project on the left is called Baxter. It just came out in Architectural Digest, the LA issue. Check it out. The house below is a very modern, like Villain's Lair of a house, but the garden above it is part of a historical property up here. When we arrived to the property, the garden had fallen in total disrepair and was literally falling down the hillside, and these columns were strewn all about the site. Rather than try to recreate what was there, which would have been really cost prohibitive, we stood some of the columns up where they were, and then we laid some of them down around the site as seats. This pool, there's a fountain up here that was a big fountain with a rill that came down into this big, long reflecting pool, and it would have been pretty wasteful of water to restore that truly. So we made the water feature smaller, built a water feature within this larger one up here, eliminated the rill, and turned the big reflecting pool into a field of poppies. So just reinterpreting historical landscapes, material reuse, trying to be creative with conservation in mind all the time. And it doesn't have to be like dirty hippie shit. It can be beautiful. The Joan Nasser orderly frames messy ecosystems. I know you know it. How many of you, oh, pardon me. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay, yeah, Becca. So it's a really well-known article within landscape architecture by a woman named Joan Nasser, orderly frames, messy ecosystems, and I would be really curious to see how that principle might apply to architecture. Within landscape architecture, her argument is that the public is not ready for messy ecosystems. They might not be ready for material reuse and kind of weird hippie collage montage type of material assembly. But if you frame it properly and you frame it in an orderly way and in a way that's legible and that the public can understand, it makes it more digestible for people. So this project, I truly was channeling Joan here and set up my orderly frames. It's off screen here, but there's a hedge around the whole project. And then there are these organizing Italian cypress that kind of create a sense of order and access, and then the exuberant native ecology all within. It can be as crazy as it wants to be. And this is an incredible habitat. If you read the article in Architectural Digest, the homeowner talks about all the critters that he sees here. So you really can do both. Water. So obviously with localizing and closing loops of matter and energy, we want to think about water. We use gray water a lot on our projects. It's more of an issue out west, but gray water is essentially water recycling from laundry and showers. It can be done in a shady environment using tropical plants, non-native, but still beautiful. This is an apartment complex where it's very shady, and kind of the urban canyon condition of the apartments makes it actually kind of hard for natives to grow in there. So we went with gray water recycling and went with more of a shady tropical feeling without feeling bad about all the resource use. The one on the right is just installed. It's an orchard. Fruit trees really love recycled water. They love the salts that come off of our bodies in the shower. And so that's been really fun. We try to push for that on all of our projects. In addition to capturing water from the home and reusing it, we seek to capture stormwater, as all good landscape architects do, but also to kind of make things multifunctional. So this is a rain garden in front of a preschool that also serves as a play element. With a water pump for the kiddos. And then in this project's got everything. This is at the bottom of a client's hill where these pavers were on site. They actually came from kind of a vertical crib wall that was falling down the hill. We took them out, put in timbers for the wall, and repurposed them as pavers down at the bottom of the site. These kind of off-the-shelf crib wall paver, or what are these called? Somebody give me the word. Come on, architects. It's a retaining wall, but what are the blocks called? There's another word. There's another word that's not coming to me. They're too vernacular for me to even know. But they're cheap and they're readily available. So we did some retaining with those and tucked native plants into them, and then stormwater capture at the bottom of the site. So just really celebrating material reuse and trying to make it as beautiful and functional as possible. I love this project. This is our office garden. We've been blessed to now finally have an office that has land. We're still renters, but this site was a full concrete pad full of junk cars for years and years. The landlord was kind enough to allow us to depave, which is something that needs to happen all throughout Los Angeles. And when we did it, we saved the urbanite, kind of created it, moved it into these sculptural piles by necessity because we were running out of room, but they ended up being quite beautiful. And then we reused all of this urbanite on projects of ours for clients that needed paving. Once we exposed the soil, we did experiments in soil remediation with sunflowers and other cover crops. And this is our garden more recently. It doesn't look like it used to. It's constantly in evolution. So the office garden in our LA office is really an expression of how we like to work, which is constantly evolving, recycling, collecting trash. We kind of like to see ourselves as sophisticated junkers, if you will. So you can see all the piles of materials that we've been collecting from projects around Los Angeles. We bring them to our site. We store them maybe for a year max, and then we have a group conversation about what needs to go. We're also really interested in material piles as habitat. There's a lot of gardeners in the UK that are talking about actually the habitat value of trash piles. So if you have trash on site, don't always assume you have to throw it away. There might actually be ecological value to mixing it with dirt and putting it in a pile in the way back of the site and letting it become a habitat for the tiny critters that we always forget about. The project on the right is an example of some pavers that we pulled from a project that sat on our site for a while and then got recycled into the garden. And we're very grateful for clients that allow us to do this. I mean, it tends to save them money also. Okay, the third principle, is that the third or the second? The third. Design for ecosystems. This one's kind of a no-brainer, but I'll talk about it anyways, especially because you guys aren't landscape architects, so you won't be totally bored by it. California is a land of incredible biodiversity. It is one of the world's biodiversity hotspots, and ironically, it's also one of the world's development hotspots, and I think that those two things are actually kind of connected. The incredible beauty of Southern California is very attractive, obviously the weather. The plant life there is insane. It's unparalleled. The diversity, the microclimates in California are very varied because of the presence of the sea, the mountains, valleys, and all of those different microclimates over millennia have created just incredible diversity. And so, but all of that diversity is threatened, especially in Southern California in the face of development. So every project we work on, we design for ecosystems in mind. We aim for 70% native plants on every project if we can do it. Really, we aim for 100%, but if we have these pesky things called clients that sometimes we have to set a limit of 70%. It's got to be that, and we work within that. We really celebrate our oak woodland, our coastal sage scrub, and our chaparral ecosystems. This again is that Baxter project, the orderly frames, messy ecosystems. It doesn't have to always be chaotic. Our native ecosystems in California are hard to read. People cannot read them. They cannot understand them. They think of them as brush. They think of them as a fire hazard. They think of them as weeds, as trash, as something to be cleared from a site. The number of clients that I have who call us up and say, well, I cleared the site and now it's ready for you to come in. And then I find out they eradicated pristine chaparral. It's more than you'd think. And it's just because of a cultural ignorance. We have plant blindness. We don't understand. This kind of chaos is hard for some people's brains to accept as good. It seems messy. It seems fire prone. It seems brown in the summer. We really strive to inject ecosystem sensitivity into our projects. And sometimes we have to use these kind of mental tricks, the orderly frames trick, to get it in there. This is a project I love. This is a public plaza in Denver. I did not work on it. I can't claim to own it, but a couple other people in my office did. And this project is entirely on structure, and it is devoted to habitat. I think this is a great example of prioritizing habitat in a highly urban setting. What I also love about this project is that the forms of this project and the plan of this project are pretty unexpected. They're not logical. And the main designer on this project, Casey Toomey, I think did a really brilliant job of expressing kind of an illogic into the plan that relates to the wildness of the plants. So he's maybe not quite following the orderly frames messy ecosystem. He's more like messy frames messy ecosystem. And I absolutely love what he did here. But really prioritizing habitat, little sneaky tricks, like we love to find boulders with depressions in them, carve them out even more, and then arrange them so that they're next to the irrigation system. So when the spray irrigation goes off, that water gets replenished. It's low tech, it's low budget, it's easy. You don't really have to think about it, and you're providing water for creatures in it. You can see the highly urban setting in the background. So this has become an oasis of habitat in downtown Denver. We are not strict about natives. The hot debates within landscape and horticulture about natives versus non-natives are ongoing and fresh every day, and it's hard to keep up. But we actually really love the symbolism, the cultural symbolism of plants from all over the world, and so we're not trying to push anybody out and say you can't be here. We welcome all plants as long as they play nice. That's kind of our planting philosophy, our planting design philosophy. So this blue agave is not technically hyperlocal to Southern California, but it's near native. It's from Mexico. It plays kind of nice. It's pretty spiky. So maybe that's not the best example, but it doesn't spread so much. It's not aggressive. It's not going to push out the other plants. So I like to say if a plant is rude or bossy, it doesn't get to come play in the playground. But if it's polite and can get along with everybody, it can come hang out and be there. And I think the visual results tend to be really exciting and also more palatable for people, right? These agaves and these succulents are a lot more legible to people and exciting to people. And so these are some of the other tricks we'll play on our clients is by mixing natives with non. Gotta show this project. This is the Storehouse in Los Angeles by Frank Lloyd Wright. Whew, Frank Lloyd Wright. We're working on a couple of his legacy projects. We're working on the Hollyhock House right now. And there's a lot of weight to it. His Mayan period, problematic, right? Little bit of appropriation, but also stunning and gorgeous. And The owner gave us a full license to do whatever we wanted here. And so our brilliant designers, Sam and Hannah, decided to try to actually bring forth Frank Lloyd Wright's original vision, which we don't think ever really happened. The original narrative on this was that this was a ruin rising out of a raw, primeval Los Angeles. But then the plants that were all there were eucalyptus and bamboo and plants that were not from Los Angeles. And I don't know what was there first. There wasn't a landscape plan, but that's what was there when we got there. And they brilliantly turned it into a palm canyon, a native palm canyon, full of ruderal plants that you don't really see at nurseries. So some of our coworkers actually collected seed and harvested more wild, kind of strange plants like cudweed that are really important habitat providers. And we've been fortunate enough to be able to have a long-lasting relationship with this project, and our designers actually come back and monitor for insect life on the project, document it, and share it back out with the clients. And I wish we had the time and money fee to do this on every project, per our conversation earlier, Becca. But just to sort of show you the teeny tiny clients that we're thinking about, in addition to our paying clients. These guys are our friends as well. I'm going to skip over this one. This one's just kind of about embedding children in wildness, and the importance of designing for ecosystems is obviously for the critters and the people beyond ourselves, but it's also for the next generation. And so we really love doing residential work because we love to see children playing in gardens. And the kind of simple play that can come from being surrounded by plants is a very unique experience that we want to impart on the next generation. You know what? I want to pause for just 1 second. One category that we haven't quite figured out where to put, or one topic that we haven't quite figured out what category to put it in, is that of fire. And I think I would be remiss to not talk about that. I know you all know about the fires that happened in the Palisades in Altadena last year. And I think today that I think fire kind of crosses across all of these categories. It's not really its own category because it has cultural import, it has ecological import, it has historical and economic import. And where we're really landing on it is that we are actively in the middle of, well, I guess we haven't landed anywhere because we are actively in the middle of a cultural dialogue on the topic of fire right now that's very difficult. And what we're starting to see stricter regulations, and we're starting to see fire districts coming for native plants. They've literally put native plants on an enemy list, saying that these cause fire. And like the fires in Palisades and Altadena didn't matter whether you had native plants in the front yard. Those were 100-mile-an-hour winds. The thing that mattered the most was whether you had whether you had screens on the vents of your home. That was the number one thing that prevented fires in those communities. And so it's actually architectural. But landscape gets blamed for this problem a lot. And we are starting to see harsher and harsher rules about Zone 0 and the WUI and all of that stuff. I don't know how much you all pay attention to wildfire code in your buildings, but it's kind of coming for everybody. I was just in Arkansas, Becca, and we asked our collaborators, do you all have to think about wildfire ever? And they said, nope, we never have to think about it. And then the next day we woke up and there was a fire warning in where we were in Arkansas. And when I took off the plane to come here, I could see a wildfire off in the distance. And so it's a topic that I think is coming for everybody. So if you haven't been thinking about it, you probably will be soon. Our fourth category is to support our community. Yes, we do private gardens, but we like to keep our community at top of mind. We have done a lot of pro bono design and also paid work and project management consultation for our local tribes, the Pomo, the Miwok, the Ohlone, the Chumash, the Tongva, the Tataviam, the Ahachiman, and the Gabrielino Shoshone. And we're very lucky to collaborate with these tribes. This project here on the right It's a beautiful example of a land back project that we're working on with the Gabrielino Shoshone. They acquired 12 acres near downtown Los Angeles, one of the biggest land back acquisitions in California. And it's been a really fascinating study in the challenges of decolonization within the context of established urban land ownership and governance. The details of this project have just been maddening to try to move their vision for a community, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a community site, and the city doesn't have a designation for it. And so the problems that we've been butting up against in terms of like, how do you define a traditional home? You know, what is the definition of that? What's the fire safety? It's been really fascinating and frustrating. The intersection of titles, regulations, engineering, building codes, NIMBYism, race and power dynamics has been, interesting to say the least. So this is Yana Village. We've been helping them formulate a master plan for their site. It's 12 acres. It's a very complicated site. It's all on urban fill, and there are structural and engineering problems on the site such that they can't capture water. So they're really limited in what they can do, but we're trying to help them maximize. This is Cafe Ohlone, which was a beautiful act of co-creation with the Ohlone people up in Berkeley. This project was very slow and lovingly put together in collaboration with members of the tribe and members of our firm, getting their hands dirty on a low budget, literally assembling this garden together hand in hand. And I'll talk more about getting dirty and process later. In the name of time, I'm going to skip over the section on schools just to say that we do have some singular design projects with schools, but our favorite projects are the ones where we have ongoing relationships over many years. This is a beautiful example of an ash tree had to come down on the site because of termite activity, and we turned it into a communal circle for the children. We love children. There they are. And one of the main cruxes of our community work is test plot, but I'm going to talk about that later. Last category is to honor process, labor, and care. So process is really huge for Terremoto. It was actually the thing I was telling Phil. It was the thing that attracted me to Terremoto in the first place. It was the first image that I saw on Terremoto's website when I first met David and Googled him were process photos. And I thought, that's landscape architecture? That's not the landscape architecture that I was taught. But David and Alan from the very beginning have always celebrated process, photographed it, made it visible, and that I think is one of the really special parts about our practice. We're not design build, but we like to pretend like we are. We like to get dirty. We like to collaborate with contractors on site. We like to improvise. We're talking about this morning with Becca and her team at Reed Hildebrand. And the ever-present question of how do we improvise within the structure of contracts and clients and budgets. And so we're always exploring those relationships. Yes, we do construction drawings, but we treat them not as super precious things that we're beholden to all the time when we can get away with it. We like to draw on site together with guys, with the guys we're working with, whether with paint or with the tractor, with the mower. And we see a lot of beauty in the process, poetry in the mess, and beauty in the in-between state. We like to have an ongoing relationship with our projects as well. So this is that Baxter project with the Italian cypress. I go back quarterly, if not more, and we have working days with our gardener where we're collaborating with them and learning from them. They're learning from us, and we are continually tending to the garden and continuing to design it through time, even though we finished that project 3 years ago. We're very lucky in that we have some trusting clients that allow us to experiment with alternative methods of land work and land care. So whether it's brush clearance through goats and sheep, or me living my dream on the hills of Ojai doing ancient techniques of scything. This is really like all I ever want to do. This is why I became a landscape architect, so that I could scythe in a field in Ojai. But it's so fun to have clients that allow us to do this kind of work. And this particular site, we were just scything the invasives back to see what natives might come up if we eliminate some of that competition. As I said, we see beauty in the process, beauty in kind of the messy in-between states. I absolutely love this image of how messy and wild and weird this Denver plaza is compared to this plaza across the street from the 80s. This was a conceptual image from our Sea Ranch project where Story explored the idea of the fact that making landscapes is a process within a process within a process, and it really is never over. So yes, we see beauty in process. We love process. We love to get dirty ourselves, but it goes deeper than that also. We see beauty in the power and the skill of the workers. David and Alan always have, and they've always brought it to the forefront of the website and the Instagram account. And I think that that's really important to share these photos and to bring visibility to the otherwise invisible labor of the people that we collaborate with. In addition to the contractors, to the power and skill of the contractors that we work with, we want to bring visibility to the role of the gardeners that we work with as well, and to try to take away the primacy of the designer and to try to give more power to the ongoing care and stewardship of a site through our ongoing relationships with gardeners. This is Alfredo on the left and Javier on the right, and they're my friends, and we text all the time, and we have a beautiful co-creation that continues to go on in both of these gardens. So our general interest in process and labor and in collaboration has led to a much bigger, more formalized effort called our Land and Labor Working Group. I want to read this quote from Paradise Transplanted by Pierrette Andenou Sotelo. "It is tempting to see gardens as little havens roped off from the public world, but they are not separate from society. Gardens and landscapes are embedded in complex social hierarchies and contestations over power and resources." We've seen a lot of exploitation on our projects. We've seen instances of wage theft and power dynamics that have made us really uncomfortable. And in the summer of 2020, when everybody was looking inward and trying to understand how we could be better allies for social justice, we decided to formalize some of our thoughts about labor and supporting the people that we work with, and to form our internal Land and Labor Working Group. We decided to publish an article in Metropolis magazine entitled "Landscape Architecture Has a Labor Acknowledgement Problem," where we talked about the problem of putting designers and designers putting themselves on pedestals above the construction industry and above workers, and trying to just kind of break down that power dynamic and that dichotomy in the name of supporting all of the people that really make our work possible. And that effort has continued to evolve. It's had reverberations in the industry. We've partnered with Reed Hildebrand and a woman named Michelle Franco from Ohio State University, whose work, if you haven't read it, please read it. Just Google her. Her articles are online. She says, "For designers concerned with social and spatial justices, it is necessary to expand the context of landscape work beyond a site's physical and historic narratives to include the context and conditions of the people laboring at the site itself." This is from her Invisible Labor article in Landscape Journal. And our internal working group and our conversations with Reed Hildebrand and with Michelle Franco have brought up a lot of really thorny themes. The themes of credit and representation. Who gets it? We try to always push for credit and representation for all of the parties involved in our projects, even if it's in Architectural Digest. We sometimes get pushback from them. That's a whole nother conversation. Love you, Arch Digest. Topics of collaboration and what it means to collaborate with people. The topic of safety and risk and what's seen as a skilled job versus an unskilled job, and kind of demystifying that definition. Very top of mind, the topic of immigration. That's a whole nother lecture. Topics of racism and classism. What's not on this list, which I will also mention, is the topic of slavery. I think the legacy of the history of slavery in this country plays into all of these power dynamics. And I know Phil also talks about the existence of slavery within the material chains, supply chains existing today as well. The topic of exploitation, economics, capitalism. There's so many big topics in here that we know we're not going to all solve, but what we're trying to do is just to start to have these honest conversations with our colleagues, our clients, our collaborators, our contractors, which has been really interesting to have these conversations with them, to come to them and tell them we want to support you, we want to make sure your guys are all making a living wage, we want to make sure you're not experiencing wage theft, and then the industry, the broader industry. And really the bottom line is that we seek to value land care and to value labor. And our efforts continue to evolve on this. We started our working group 6 years ago. Right now, we are actively collaborating with some other people in the industry to counteract some of the existing policies of this administration, and to try to protect some of the people that we work with, and to encourage others to speak out on it as well. The topic of labor flows nicely into test plot, which is what I'm going to close in the 3 minutes that I have left. I might go over a little bit, sorry. I'll try to wrap it up nicely. Test plot for me is really a culmination of all of these themes. Honoring process, labor and care, community, ecology, closed loops, beauty and modesty. Test plot is an ongoing experiment in community land care that Terremoto co-founded. The project has now grown way beyond us in a really beautiful and spectacular way. And I'm hoping that maybe even Reed Hildebrand, we will start to collaborate on some test plots together. Our guiding principles for test plot are to cultivate biodiversity and beauty, to have hands in the soil, the land needs laborers, to be low tech and low budget, to be agile, to close loops. Experimentation is good, we have permission to fail, to embrace diverse land ethics, to research and learn, to share knowledge together, and replicability in mind. This last one is really important. I don't like to use the word scale. I don't want to know how these ideas can scale. I'm not interested in that. I want to know how can they replicate. And I'll explain that a little bit more later. For a little context, this is the greater Los Angeles basin. All the gray is urban, all the green are the rings of beautiful mountains that surround our cities. There's kind of an interesting balance there. It's, this is 30, 50 miles wide, so it's a lot of urban. Here's downtown LA. This is downtown here. This is Dodger Stadium. This is Elysian Park. This is where Test Plot was started, in an urban park surrounded by the LA River, downtown, and surrounded by urban communities. It's LA's oldest park. At 65 acres, and it has a lot of problems. Has a lot of beauty, but has a lot of problems. It was ranched and taken from the indigenous people and ranched originally by the settlers, and the land was really degraded. There are patches of intact ecology, but there are also massive stands of eucalyptus, which are highly flammable, in addition to invasive grasses and perennials on the ground plane, which are also not adapted, and they're highly flammable as well. Mustard, everybody thinks this is a beautiful super bloom and they come and they take selfies. It's not. It's a wildly invasive plant that's highly problematic. It puts out toxins that prevent the native plants on the ground plane from being able to come up. They dry out. They're highly flammable. And you can see this scar across the landscape. This represents the 100-foot fire line from the community that has to get brush cleared every year. So here are the brush clearance crews coming through the park annually to tear down all of that mustard and remove the fire hazard. But what's problematic about this regime of care is that it's extremely violent, extremely loud, extremely disruptive to the ecosystems, and it mows down any native plant that might be popping up. These contracts go out to the lowest bidders. These guys are, they might be trained, but they're trying to work fast in order to meet the deadline. And it's literally why we have our test plot fencing, is to defend against the contractors that Rec and Park hire to care for the park. So we're piggybacking off of an existing community garden where there exists a lone hose bib, kind of a relic of another era in our public parks. You wouldn't see that installed today. Nobody really knows about it. It's why we get away with it. But that hose bib allows us to start test plot. We were interested in Marion Harlow Grove and in the community garden that had existed there for decades, but there were not really very many native plants in here. It was a lot of jade and aloe and really beautiful plants from all over the world, but not enough natives in our mind. So we came up with this concept of test plot to try to reverse some of the damage of these maintenance practices within the park. And the concept, as I said, is really low tech and low budget. We started on that lone hose bib. we bought a hose, and we bought a circular sprinkler from Home Depot. And the location of these first 4 plots was determined by how far the hose could go from the hose bib, and the shape of the plot was determined by the throw of the sprinkler. So the design is informed by the utility and by the infrastructure, the cheap, affordable, accessible infrastructure. And interestingly, I think actually this design has become quite beautiful and quite iconic for Test Plot. It's kind of a brand symbol for us, and really it was just born out of utility and simplicity, and us trying to make it as easy as possible for volunteers to water the plots. So the access points for the plots are right on axis with the hose bib, and the fencing went around at the extent of the sprinkler. We watered to flush out the seed bank, and weeded and watered and weeded again per the advice of some horticulturalists and ecologists that we consulted with. And we had weeding parties. We called them Plant Church. A lot of people came. The pandemic hit, and Test Plot was actually really successful during the pandemic. It was kind of a special time where people were really clamoring for community and for stewardship and to have their hands in the soil and to be outside. This was our very first Test Plot. It truly was an experiment. We did have a plant list that we closely created in collaboration with experts, but it was very improvisational, and I think that the result has been very beautiful. This is the first day of planting. This is a little bit after planting. And then ongoing community care, watering in the summer, enjoying it in the spring, enjoying the blooms in the spring. Test Plot has now grown way beyond Terremoto's first plot in Elysian Park. Jen Toy is now the executive director. Max Cantor and I are on the board. Max and I are the co-founders of the original plot. Jen has taken the mantle and expanded it into an official nonprofit and taken it into 16 other parks across California. So what started as a little seed of an idea of can we improve stewardship in one park has replicated into 16 other communities throughout Southern and Northern California. This is at Rio de Los Angeles State Park, totally different model. This was in collaboration with the students at USC. Jen's been using the students to help the work get a little more rigorous and scientific. This is the third test plot at Baldwin Hills in a totally different part of Los Angeles. On campus at USC, each community group is different. Each partnership is different. So there is no one model of care. How often we go, what tools we use, who's in charge, it's different at every test plot. It's very customized. There's not one model fits all. The only model is that it's community land care. And we do share our knowledge with what we've learned at other parks, but it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. These are the plots now, fully established after many years. We've taken down the fencing. Bunnies are living in here, and now we're moving on to more interesting experiments. My new passion is to work only from seed, to try to close our loops down even further, and to stop buying plants in plastic pots. So we're harvesting seed from our plots. We are buying some seed as well from local sources, and we are using ancient methods of suppressing or cutting or mowing down the weeds, paying really close attention to the weather and timing the sowing of the seeds with the rains, and continuing to weed. Weeding is beautiful. Weeding is wonderful, and maintenance is a good thing. I think for me, Test Plot is so beautiful because it is really a protest of capital L, capital A landscape architecture. I love our profession. I am a landscape architect, but I do think our profession has moved too far away from gardening, and we prioritize high gloss, high budget, sexy, award-winning projects when really we should all be having our hands in the dirt, acting as stewards of the planet. And I think it's a great role for designers to kind of take on projects like that. So weeding is good, maintenance is a good thing. When clients tell you that they want a low maintenance project, see if you can fight back against that. And the results are beautiful. We were blessed with an atmospheric river that year, the first year we tried it. And there were thousands of white-lined sphinx moths all over the Clarkia. That's the pink flower. So the creation of habitat is visible and palpable. And the engagement with the community is as well. Because we're designers, we can't help ourselves, and we have to make it cute. So we like to play around with forms. This year we have a new form called the Blob. I don't have a picture of it yet, but if you watch our Instagram account, you'll see it. Hopefully we'll have a super bloom later in the year. And yeah, I guess I'll just end with, I would encourage you, I know most of you are not landscape architects, but I do wonder if there's a way for you to adopt a test plot state of mind, a state of mind that's more experimental, affordable, accessible, community-oriented, and boots on the ground, and see if you can apply that to your own practice. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think we do have time for a few questions, and it would be wonderful if you ask them. Yes, please. Come take Ethan's question, please.
Thank you. This is where does like food production and urban farming kind of belong in? Does it belong to your practice? Does it belong to the practice of umbrella of landscape architecture?
Yes, absolutely. I know I didn't talk about it much here, but I would say it's part of our closed loop ethos. And most of our private residences, we do, it's California. So they want fruit trees, they want raised beds, and it is a part of our practice for sure. Especially with the schools that we work with. We do a lot of edible gardens with the schools that we work with.
Thank you for such a good lecture. I'm very familiar with your work being from California, and it's such beautiful landscapes. I was wondering if you could speak to the specific ecology of LA with the LA River and sort of the work that Metabolic Studio is doing right now, as well as the soil remediation with the recent fires, and whether you're involved in any work in that field.
We are... It's a lot. That's a whole different lecture that you just asked me for. So I'm not going to do that. But, okay, first, LA River, fascinating. It's the reason I first became interested in LA and ended up moving there, was because I fell in love with the LA River and the strange dystopian ecology of that system. And if you don't know about the LA River, read about it. It's so strange and weird and wonderful. And there was a big movement in the community in Los Angeles about 15 years ago to rewild the LA River, to revitalize the LA River, led by Mia Lehrer's office. And it was beautiful and inspiring to me as a young practitioner fresh out of school. But the problem is that we've developed the city right up to the boundaries of the river. And so now Frank Gehry's office and Olin are working on a new master plan for the river that is like more of a bubble burster, because it bursts the bubble of the dream of rewilding the river, because engineers have determined that you can't tear out the concrete of the LA River because it will slow the water down so much that it will break the levees and spread out into the communities and cause flooding. So we've tied our own hands with the concretization and the channelization of the LA River. It cannot be undone unless we were to buy out the millions of people that live along the LA River. So it's like a very messed up paradox that we live in right now. And so now the effort from ecologists, landscape architects, urban planners, everyone's talking about decentralizing that dream of rewilding the LA River into our city, and to try to consider the whole watershed. So like every tiny site that we work on should be engaging in water capture, slowing down, filtering, creating habitat. It's kind of like a sad fact that dream of rewilding the LA River will never be, but we can channel that energy into other projects around the city in the greater watershed. Soil remediation is a massive topic. We are actively engaged with it on a couple projects, a couple fire rebuilds. It's one of the first things we're doing on sites that have burned. But what we don't have an answer to is where these forever chemicals go. Because even when you remediate and you remove it, where does it go? Somebody's going to suffer down the line. That trash is going to go somewhere. Even if you're remediating with plants, with sunflowers, beautiful idea. We did it in our office garden. And then we just cut the sunflowers and we put them in the trash because we didn't really know what to do. Luckily, our lead levels were actually not that high. It was more of a symbolic experiment. But it's a problem we don't really have a solution for. And Los Angeles is still very much in the thick of it. People are still testing their homes. They're still testing their soil. We don't know what the impact of the fires will be long term on the city. We're still figuring it out, and we probably will be for 50 years. And so, yeah, I don't know. Stay tuned. But it's something we're actively working on, and we don't have an answer for it.
Thank you so much for this talk. I'm one of the few School of the Environment students here.
Yay!
At the School of the Environment, we talk a lot about payments for ecosystem services. I'm just wondering to what degree the ecosystem benefits of the projects you work on are financially valued, or what sort of support or benefits you might get that would decrease the cost of these projects through those benefits.
We are not numbers people. We're like tree huggers. So we have not done sort of intelligent economistic ecosystem services calculations, the type of thing I was trained to do in school when I studied urban planning. But we kind of know in our hearts that they're the right thing to do. We do tell clients about financial benefits of material reuse, and I have had clients that I've convinced to not tear out a series of walls on their property just because they don't like the aesthetic because of the carbon, the embodied carbon in that project, but more so it was actually the finances. That was really how I convinced them. It was less the climate shaming, which was an angle I was going for a little bit with them, and it was more the cost. I just said, to build new walls here is going to be $500,000. Why don't you save your money and, you can build a pool later down the line or whatever. So speaking to people's purse strings works. There are financial incentives in Los Angeles for things like tearing out your lawn and replacing it with natives. But the governance structures of those are so convoluted and actually counterproductive that we don't engage with a lot of that. Through TestPlot, we have been engaging with more and more grants that are not really coming from federal money, but from state money that seek to enhance ecosystem services through stormwater management. Most of it's actually water management and fire mitigation. So we're starting to enter that territory, but that's still pretty new for us.